Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. France's far right made history last weekend as it stormed to victory in the country's first poll since the Paris attacks that killed 130 people. The Front National left both the ruling centre-left and Sarkozy's centre-right in its wake as it claimed victory in 6 out of 13 regions across France. But is France's swing to the far right a knee-jerk reaction to the November the 13th attacks, or has it been slowly building? Some blame the economic failures of successive mainstream governments. Others say France has lost its trust in Europe. But it's a sentiment that is being echoed across parts of Europe. Austria, the Netherlands and Italy have all got behind far-right parties. Today's newsmaker is France's Front National leader, Marine Le Pen, as we ask if we're seeing a new dawn for European politics.
For the first time, the far right appears to be on the brink of power in regional France. The National Front recently finished ahead in 6 out of 13 regions in the first round of elections. Its leader, Marine Le Pen, is anti-immigration and anti-Europe. She has tried to reinvent the party, appealing to voters who are voiceless and disenfranchised. The regional elections were the first test of voter sentiment since the attacks last month in Paris that killed 130 people.
The support to the Front National grows stronger every election. Political leaders will try to find excuses because they're unable to question themselves. This time, they will use the terrorist attacks in Paris to justify this historical result.
The National Front's success is already changing the political dynamic in France. Prime Minister Manuel Valls has urged his Socialist Party supporters to vote strategically for the centre-right in the next round and has pulled out some of his candidates to avoid splitting the vote. He says the far right is a force that will divide France and that must be stopped. Provocative images, nationalist rhetoric, angry exchanges. When it comes to the far right, though, it's not just France. This is Dresden in eastern Germany, a country where many of those views have been practically outlawed since the end of the Second World War. This is the street movement Pegida, patriotic Europeans against Islamization of the West.
What worries me most is that Germany is being taken over. I live in Berlin, and when I take public transportation, the bus or subway, I see more and more foreigners.
Refugees can come when they come from a country at war, but what's happening here in Germany is an Islamic invasion.
Although not a force at the ballot box, Pegida's growing popularity highlights the rise of the far right across Europe. And in many countries, the draw of the right has translated into votes. In the last European parliamentary elections, France's National Front won 23 seats. Italy's Northern League gained 5. The Freedom Party in Austria took 4, as did the Dutch Party of Freedom. Some members of the centre-right and centre-left are struggling to define their message, and their reforms are failing to pull in enough votes. Charismatic politicians leading the far right are offering a slicker image, their policies less extreme than before, and they're attracting voters who seem to be tired of the mainstream. Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from London is Vincenzo Scarpetta, a political analyst at Open Europe, who says the Front National's historic results should be a wake-up call to the EU. Thanks for joining us, Vincenzo. Has this been a long time coming?
Well, I think I disagree with those who say that the historic result of Front National is just the fruit of some sort of knee-jerk reaction of French voters to last month tragic terrorist attacks in Paris, because the reality is that Front National has been growing for a while because it was the most voted party in last year's European Parliament elections. It had already made important gains in the local elections earlier this year. So it is more than just a reaction. I do think the terrorist attacks, as well as the ongoing refugee crisis, have played a role in driving support for Front National up, but as usual, This is a more complex phenomenon, and there are several factors behind the surge of this party.
You say cutting across all types of sectors of French society. You're looking straight down the barrel of the camera right now. You won't be able to see this image behind me and on the wall of their supporters. Most tend to be middle-aged. I don't see anybody of a darker skin at all. They all seem to be Caucasian, and their salute is just a few degrees away from what seems to be a Nazi salute. Is it fair to call these people fascists? Is it fair to call them Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, racists?
Well, you have to consider that the leader of Front National, Marine Le Pen, has been working on this point. In French, they say dédiabolisation, so like a detoxification of the image of Front National as a xenophobic party. Of course, there has been, and probably there still is, a component of that, because we shouldn't forget the controversial remarks made by Marine Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who said that gas chambers were a detail of history. But I would actually disagree with you when you say they look mostly middle-aged, because according to opinion polls, Front National is quite attractive among young voters. So 35% of people aged 18-34 in France, according to opinion polls. Obviously, we don't know the exact breakdown of votes. So 35% of people aged 18-34 voted Front National. So it is, again, as I said, it's cutting across all sectors and all age brackets, so to say, of the French society.
Final question for you. How do they compare to the Jobbiks in Hungary, the Pegidas, the Golden Dawns in Greece, and other similar movements we're seeing across the continent? What makes them so different?
Well, I'm always really cautious when it comes to comparing parties in different countries, because each country has its own political reality. I think Front National at the moment is really becoming, I would say, part of the political mainstream in France. I mean, the former French president, Nicolas Sarkozy, said this morning that voting Front National is not immoral, and it's not against the Republic. So there is growing acceptance even among the so-called, the traditional, the mainstream parties, that Front National is now part of the mainstream. And you shouldn't forget that Marine Le Pen herself, she has refused alliances with Jobbik at the European Parliament, for example, and with Golden Dawn as well. So Marine Le Pen, as I said before, is trying to distance herself from other parties that are labeled as far right. We could incidentally also discuss whether the economic policies of Front National are really right-wing, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, we'll do that.
As I said, Marine Le Pen is trying to detoxify.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you very much, Vincenzo. It's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you very much for your analysis and your thoughts.